Serafina sat on the cold pavement outside Aleem Hotel, the weight of the night's humiliation still heavy on her chest. The grand ballroom behind her was still filled with laughter and celebration. Jide's celebration. She felt like she had lost everything. Her father's company gone. Her marriage shattered. Her best friend betrayed her. Her dignity trampled in front of a crowd. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to steady her breathing, but then she heard a familiar voice. Serafina. Serafina Okono sat in the vast, elegant office that once belonged to her father, staring blankly at the enormous mahogany desk. The air smelled of rich leather and polished wood, the same comforting scent she had known since childhood. But today that comfort felt distant. Her father, Alistair Okono, was gone. His sudden passing had left her not only grieving but also burdened with an empire she had no idea how to run. At 25 years old, Serafina was soft-hearted, kind, and deeply shy. Unlike her father, a shrewd businessman known for his relentless ambition, she had never seen herself as the heir to his billion-naira empire. She had always been his princess, the girl he spoiled, the daughter he adored. "One day you will take over everything," he used to say with pride. But now that the moment had come, Serafina felt nothing but fear. The board members had little confidence in her abilities. The investors whispered behind closed doors. Even the employees who had once treated her like royalty now viewed her as a fragile, inexperienced woman out of her depth. But there was one person who didn't doubt her. Jide Cole, her father's trusted personal assistant. Jide had worked under Alistair Okono for years, handling delicate company affairs with a charm that made him instantly likable. He was tall, charismatic, and incredibly persuasive. Women admired him, and men respected him. "You don't have to worry, Serafina. I'll help you," Jide said, offering one of his famous reassuring smiles as he sat across from her. Serafina looked at him, relief washing over her. Jide had been by her side since her father's funeral, handling company matters while she tried to cope with her grief. He had supported her through board meetings, helped her navigate complex business decisions, and ensured that everything ran smoothly. Over time, Serafina grew to trust him completely. Jide wasn't just an employee anymore. He was her closest confidant. He was charming, understanding, and most importantly, he believed in her when no one else did. One evening, 6 months after her father's passing, Jide invited her to dinner at an upscale restaurant in Victoria Island. The lights were dim, the air smelled of grilled steak and fine wine, and the soft hum of jazz music filled the background. Serafina had assumed it was a business meeting, but the moment she arrived, she realized it was something more. "Serafina," Jide said, reaching across the table to hold her hand. His voice was softer than usual, his eyes warm. "I know you're still finding your way in this world without your father, and I know things have been hard for you. But I want you to know that I will always be here for you." Serafina felt a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected this, but she didn't pull her hand away. "I love you," Jide continued. "Not just as your father's assistant, not just as a friend, but as a man who sees you for who you truly are. Will you marry me?" The words hit her like a wave, and for a moment, she felt as if the world had paused. Marriage. She hadn't thought about it. She had spent months drowning in grief, trying to figure out how to run a business she barely understood. But now, looking at Jide, his warm, expectant face, the way he made her feel safe, everything seemed to fall into place. Here was a man who cared for her, a man who had been her rock when everything crumbled. "Yes," Serafina whispered, her heart racing. "I'll marry you." The wedding was grand, a display of wealth and status that made headlines across the country. Dignitaries, business tycoons, and celebrities attended the lavish ceremony. Serafina wore a custom white gown that sparkled under the lights, looking every bit like the fairy tale princess her father had always called her. As she walked down the aisle, she felt lucky. She had found love and security in a man who stood beside her through everything. For the first 6 months of marriage, everything was perfect. Jide showered her with affection, whispered sweet nothings into her ear, and assured her that their life together would be filled with nothing but happiness. But then things changed. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Jide looked at her with disgust. "Serafina, you need to lose weight," he said casually, swirling his glass of wine. "People laugh at you behind your back. Do you want to embarrass me?" Serafina froze. The words stung, cutting deeper than she expected. She started, but Jide waved her off. "I'm just saying this for your own good," he continued. "You're too fat. You need to do something about it." Serafina felt the air leave her lungs. This was not the man she had married. As the days passed, Jide grew harsher, more controlling. He dismissed her from business meetings, claiming she didn't understand anything about running a company. When she tried to discuss financial issues, he shut her down. "Just stay home, Serafina. Let me handle things." Her confidence shattered, but she stayed silent. She loved him. She didn't want to fight. But then one afternoon, she found an envelope on the dining table. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were divorce papers. Serafina stared in horror. The man who had promised to stand by her, who had asked for her hand in marriage, was now discarding her like trash. When Jide came home that night, she confronted him, her voice trembling. "Jide, what is this?" she asked, holding up the papers. "Why?" Jide looked at her coldly, unbothered. "I'm tired, Serafina," he said. "Who wants to be married to an elephant?" Tears burned her eyes. She had trusted him, loved him, and now he was walking away. But he wasn't just leaving her. He was taking everything with him. And this was just the beginning of her downfall. Serafina sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the divorce papers in her trembling hands. The weight of Jide's words still echoed in her mind. Who wants to be married to an elephant? Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. How had everything changed so fast? How had the man who once promised her forever turned into a monster overnight? She stormed downstairs to confront him. He sat in the living room, casually sipping a glass of whiskey, as if he hadn't just shattered her world. "Jide," she said, her voice shaking. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't even look at her. "I already told you. I'm tired." "Tired of what?" "Of me. Of this marriage." Jide let out a cold chuckle. "Serafina, let's be honest. You were never meant for this world. You're soft, naive, and let's not forget, embarrassing." Serafina gasped, clutching her chest. "I gave you everything, Jide. I trusted you. And that was your mistake," he said, setting his drink down. "I never needed your trust. I needed control." Serafina felt the room spin. The realization hit her like a slap. This man never loved her. He loved what she had. "I built your father's empire, Serafina." Jide continued, standing up. You were just a placeholder. And now I've outgrown you." The coldness in his voice made her blood run cold. "Get out of my house," Serafina whispered, her voice barely holding together. Jide smirked. "Oh, Serafina, darling. This isn't your house anymore." Her heart stopped. "What do you mean?" she asked slowly. Jide tossed a folder onto the coffee table. "I sold it." Serafina's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the couch. Her house. Gone. "Pack your things," Jide said, already heading upstairs. "I need you gone by morning." She couldn't breathe. Her father's home, the place where she grew up, where she felt safe, was no longer hers. But the nightmare was far from over. Serafina barely slept. By dawn, she hurried to her father's company, desperate to stop whatever Jide had done. When she arrived, the gates were locked. Confused, she called one of the security guards, Dominic Uche, who had worked for her father for years. "Madam," Dominic said hesitantly. You shouldn't be here." "What are you talking about?" "This is my company." Dominic's face twisted with guilt. "Madam, the company is closed." Serafina's heart pounded. No, this can't be happening." "I don't understand," she whispered. "Where is everyone?" Dominic glanced around before leaning in. Jide sold everything. Her vision blurred. What? I tried to warn you, madam, but he changed everything overnight. New contracts, new buyers. The company is gone. Serafina staggered back, shaking her head. Whoa. This is not real. Her father's empire. Her legacy. Her entire life. She gripped Dominic's arm. Who bought it? Dominic swallowed hard. I heard Jide launched a new company. They're celebrating tonight at Eco Hotel. Serafina's stomach twisted. He had taken everything from her. And now he was celebrating. She turned away, fury boiling inside her. This wasn't the end. The grand ballroom was filled with Nigeria's biggest business moguls, politicians and celebrities. It was Jide's night, and the whole world was watching. Dressed in an expensive tuxedo, he stood on the elevated stage, a glass of champagne in one hand and a cocky smirk on his face. My friends, Jide said, his voice smooth and confident. Tonight we celebrate a new era. I present to you Coal Industries. The crowd cheered. Serafina stood at the entrance, her breath coming in short gasps. She spotted Jide on stage. And beside him, her best friend, Thomason. Serafina felt sick. Thomason had been her closest friend since university. They had shared everything. Dreams, secrets, sisterhood. And now she was standing beside Jide, laughing, glowing, like the perfect trophy. Serafina clenched her fists. Not only had Jide stolen her company, but he had stolen her best friend too. Then Jide took Thomason's hand. Thomason, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. You've been my greatest support. The woman I truly deserve. Tonight I want to make it official. He knelt down. The crowd gasped. Serafina felt the floor fall beneath her. No. Will you marry me? Jide asked, holding up a diamond ring. Thomason giggled, covering her mouth. Yes, Jide. Yes. The crowd erupted in applause. Something snapped inside Serafina. Before she could stop herself, she marched forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The crowd fell silent as she stepped into the light. Jide's face dropped. Thomason's eyes widened in shock. Serafina's chest rose and fell with fury. How could you, she said, her voice shaking but strong. Jide recovered quickly. Smirking, he stepped off the stage. You're embarrassing yourself, Serafina, he said smoothly. Serafina's nails dug into her palm. You stole my father's company. And now you're with my best friend? Jide laughed. Your father's company. You mean the one you were too fat to manage? The crowd gasped. Serafina felt her hands tremble. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Jide slapped her across the face. The sound echoed through the hall. Serafina staggered back, gripping her cheek. Security, Jide called out lazily. Take this whale out of here. Tears burned her eyes as the guards grabbed her arms and dragged her outside. She hit the pavement outside the hotel, her dress torn, her spirit crushed. Sitting there, humiliated, she thought of her father's words. You are my princess. One day you will take over. She wiped her tears. This isn't over, Jide, she whispered. Serafina sat on the cold pavement outside Aleem Hotel, the weight of the night's humiliation still heavy on her chest, tears streaming down her face. The grand ballroom behind her was still filled with laughter and celebration. Jide's celebration. She felt like she had lost everything. Her father's company gone. Her marriage shattered. Her best friend betrayed her. Her dignity trampled in front of a crowd. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to steady her breathing, but then she heard a familiar voice. Serafina. She looked up. Standing before her was Elvis Toby Wichukwu, her childhood friend, now a self-made billionaire and one of the most respected business moguls in the country. He knelt beside her, concern written all over his face. What happened to you? The sight of someone who genuinely cared for her broke her completely. Serafina sobbed. Without another word, Tobe pulled her into his arms, shielding her from the stares of onlookers. Tobe took her to his mansion in Ikoyi, a luxurious but warm home filled with art, books, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. As they sat in his massive living room, he handed her a cup of warm tea and waited patiently. "Hey, I lost everything," Serafina finally whispered. Tobe remained quiet, giving her space to speak. "My father's company, my house. Even my best friend. Jide took it all. And I let him." Her voice cracked, and she looked down at her shaking hands. Tobe exhaled. "I never liked that man." Serafina let out a bitter laugh. "You and my father both." Tobe leaned forward. "Listen to me, Sarah. This isn't the end for you." She shook her head. "I don't even know where to start." "Then let's start with you," Tobe said. Serafina blinked. "What do you mean?" Tobe walked over to a cupboard and pulled out a small bottle of herbal tea. "This," he said, setting it in front of her, "is something my mother used to take. She struggled with weight for years. But she changed her habits, and this helped her." Serafina stared at the bottle. "You think I need to lose weight?" Tobe smiled gently. "I think you need to feel like yourself again. And if that means making changes for your own confidence, then why not?" Serafina looked at the bottle again, then back at Tobe. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." The next morning, Serafina started her journey. She followed Tobe's strict diet and workout plan, waking up early every morning to train with his private fitness coach. It wasn't easy. Her body ached. She wanted to give up so many times. But every time she looked in the mirror, she saw Jide's sneering face calling her an elephant. That thought fueled her. She stuck to the plan, drinking the herbal tea, exercising daily, and eating right. And slowly she started to change. Her face became slimmer, her body leaner, and most importantly, her confidence grew. Months passed. One morning, she stood in front of the full-length mirror, staring at herself. Gone was the timid, heartbroken woman who had been thrown out of her own company. In her place stood a strong, beautiful, confident Serafina. For the first time in a long time, she smiled. Tobe entered the room and froze. "Wow," he whispered, eyes widening. "You look incredible." Serafina turned to him. "I feel incredible." Tobe grinned. "Then let's show the world." A high-profile business event was coming up, one attended by the country's top business moguls, politicians, and socialites, including Jide. Serafina knew this was her chance. She would walk in, stronger, more powerful, and make Jide regret ever crossing her. But she needed a plan. "Introduce me as your sister," she told Tobe. Tobe raised a brow. "Why?" "Because if Jide thinks I'm someone new, he'll fall right into my trap." Tobe chuckled. "Damn, Sarah. You're dangerous." He smirked. "He taught me well." The night of the event, Serafina walked in beside Tobe, dressed in an elegant, form-fitting black gown that turned every head in the room. People whispered as she passed. Jide, who had been laughing with guests, suddenly froze. His eyes locked onto her, confused, mesmerized. But he didn't recognize her. He turned to Tobe. "Who's the beautiful woman with you?" Tobe smiled knowingly. "Oh, her. That's Megan, my sister. She just returned from studying abroad." Jide's jaw tightened. He couldn't take his eyes off Megan. Serafina extended a polite, teasing smile. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Cole." Jide took her hand, his grip lingering. "The pleasure is mine," he said. Serafina felt a satisfied smirk threatening to break free. He had no idea. This was only the beginning. As the night went on, Serafina played her part perfectly. She flirted subtly, made Jide notice her, and acted completely unbothered by his existence. Jide was hooked. Tommy, who stood beside him, noticed. "Jide," she whispered. "Why are you staring at her like that?" Jide barely heard her. He was too busy trying to figure out why he felt drawn to Megan. Serafina excused herself and walked past him, her perfume lingering in the air. Jide's eyes followed her. He had no idea that the woman he was lusting after was the very same woman he had humiliated. Serafina smirked as she sipped her champagne. Let the games begin. Serafina had never felt so in control before. For months, she had lived in Jide's shadow, crushed under the weight of his betrayal. But now she was the one holding the strings, and Jide had no idea. As the business event buzzed with conversations, she observed him from across the hall, watching how he kept stealing glances at her. His curiosity growing by the minute. Jide was intrigued. Exactly as she had planned. Tobe, standing beside her, chuckled. He's already falling for it. Serafina smirked, taking a sip of her drink. Good. Let's make sure he falls hard. As Serafina moved through the lavish event, she made sure to draw Jide's attention, not too obviously, just enough to keep him restless. She laughed lightly at Tobe's jokes, flipped her hair at the right moments, and moved with a confidence that was impossible to ignore. Jide, standing with Tommy, was visibly distracted. Jide, Tommy hissed, annoyed. Are you even listening to me? Jide barely responded. He was watching Megan. After some time he couldn't resist anymore. He approached. Mr. Iwuchukwu, he said, nodding at Tobe, then turned to Serafina with a charming smile. And who might you be? Serafina pretended to be shy. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have introduced myself. Megan. Jide's eyes lingered on her. Megan, he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. Tobe smirked. She just returned from abroad. Studied business. Jide raised an eyebrow. A woman in business. I'd love to hear your thoughts on corporate leadership. Serafina gave a soft smile, knowing exactly what he was doing. Maybe another time, Mr. Cole, she said smoothly, turning away before he could say more. Jide watched her walk off, completely intrigued. He had no idea that he had just walked into a trap. The following week, Jide sent Tobe a business lunch invitation. But when Tobe arrived, Jide looked disappointed. He had been hoping Megan would come. I was expecting your sister, Jide admitted. Tobe acted casual. Oh, Megan. She's been busy with some projects. Why are you interested? Jide paused before chuckling. I find her fascinating. Tobe raised an eyebrow. That's surprising. You never struck me as a man who was into powerful women. Jide smirked. I never realized I was. Tobe leaned back. I'll let her know you asked about her. Jide nodded, but something flickered in his eyes. An excitement, an obsession already forming. A few days later, Jide himself called Megan Serafina. Hello, she answered, keeping her voice cool and collected. Megan, Jide's smooth voice came through. I know we met briefly at the event, but I'd love to get to know you better. Would you be open to lunch? Serafina let a beat of silence pass, just to keep him on edge. Then she gave a gentle laugh. I suppose I could make time. Great, Jide said quickly. Tomorrow at noon. She pretended to hesitate. All right, but just lunch. I don't mix business with pleasure. Jide chuckled. I wouldn't dream of it. Liar. Serafina hung up, her smirk growing. Jide had taken the bait. And now it was time to reel him in. The next afternoon, Serafina arrived at the five-star restaurant where Jide had arranged their meeting. She walked in wearing a classy yet subtly seductive dress, her confidence shining through. Jide stood as she approached, his eyes devouring her every move. You look stunning, he said smoothly. Serafina smiled, playing innocent. That's kind of you to say. They sat down, and over the next hour she let him talk about himself, stroking his ego just enough to make him comfortable. Then she steered the conversation towards business. I hear you run Cole Industries, she said. It must be difficult managing such a large company. Jide sighed, acting as though he were burdened. It is. Running a company takes a lot. It requires someone who is sharp, ruthless, and decisive. Serafina tilted her head. And you're all of those things. Jide smirked. Clearly. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten where I am. Serafina smiled just slightly. And where was that? How did you start your company? Jide hesitated for a second. Serafina leaned in slightly, watching him. Jide gave a fake sigh, then said, I had to take control of my own destiny. Some people aren't fit to run an empire, but I am. He had no idea he was confessing to stealing her father's business. Interesting, she said, stirring her drink. And what about your personal life? Are you married? Jide's smirk faltered for the briefest second. That's complicated. Serafina kept her expression neutral, even though inside she was laughing. This was easier than she thought. I should go, she said suddenly. Jide looked startled. So soon? She smiled. I don't want to waste too much of your time. You're a busy man after all. Jide stood up quickly as she grabbed her purse. Let me walk you out. He escorted her to her car, standing just a little too close as she got in. As she rolled down the window, he hesitated. I'd love to see you again. Serafina gave a sweet, knowing smile. We'll see. Then she drove off, leaving Jide staring after her, completely captivated. That night, Jide sat in his penthouse office, staring at the city lights. His mind kept drifting to Megan. There was something about her, her presence, her mystery, the way she didn't seem desperate for his attention. It was irresistible. He wanted more. Meanwhile, back at Tobe's house, Serafina was pouring herself a glass of wine, smiling to herself. He's falling, Tobe observed. Serafina took a sip. Now we make him lose everything. Tobe leaned against the bar. How far are you willing to go? Serafina turned to him, her eyes fierce and unwavering. As far as it takes. Jide couldn't stop thinking about Megan. Days had passed since their lunch, and yet her face, her voice, her confidence, everything about her, stayed in his mind like a song on repeat. For the first time in a long time he felt challenged. Women always threw themselves at him, eager to impress, desperate for his attention. But Megan, she was different. She wasn't chasing him, and that made him want her even more. He found himself texting her, calling her, inviting her to private dinners and exclusive events. And Serafina, disguised as Megan, played her role perfectly. She accepted some invites, rejected others, keeping him desperate, making him work for her attention. Meanwhile, Tommy, his wife, was growing suspicious. Who is she? Tommy demanded one night as Jide arrived home late. Jide didn't even look up from his phone. Who? Tommy clenched her fists. That Megan woman. I see how you look at her. I'm not stupid, Jide. Jide let out an annoyed sigh, rubbing his temples. You're being dramatic, Tommy. Tommy narrowed her eyes. I left everything for you. I turned against my own best friend for you. And now you're treating me like this. Jide's patience snapped. Your best friend was a fool, he spat. She never deserved her father's company, and she never deserved me. You should be grateful I chose you. Tommy staggered back, his words hitting her like a slap. Tears burned in her eyes. You never loved me, did you? Jide sighed, bored. Love is for the weak. Tommy felt her stomach twist. And for the first time she realized she had made the biggest mistake of her life. While Jide's marriage crumbled, Serafina tightened her grip. She pretended to be the perfect support system for Jide, always there when he needed to vent, always saying the right things, always making him feel understood. He trusted her completely. One evening, as they shared drinks at an exclusive lounge, he leaned in closer than usual. You know, Megan, he murmured, swirling his whiskey. You're unlike any woman I've ever met. Serafina smiled softly, tilting her head. Oh, and what kind of women do you usually meet? Jide chuckled. Predictable ones. Women who beg for attention. Who are desperate to impress me. Serafina smirked. That must be exhausting. Jide exhaled, shaking his head. You have no idea. Serafina leaned forward slightly. Maybe they're not the problem, Jide. Maybe it's you. Jide froze. For a moment his mask slipped. No one had ever spoken to him that way before. He should have been offended. But instead, he was intrigued. More than ever. I need you in my life, Megan, he said, reaching for her hand. Serafina pulled back gracefully, laughing lightly. Slow down, Mr. Cole. You're married. Jide exhaled, suddenly looking tired. Not for long. As Jide fell deeper into Serafina's trap, his company was on the brink of collapse. The investors were getting nervous, and the business deal that was supposed to save him was at risk. Jide's biggest client, an international firm, had planned to sign a multi-million naira contract with coal industries. It was the deal of a lifetime, and Serafina knew it. So she made her next move. Using the trust she had built, she secretly gained access to key company documents and leaked information that led to the deal falling apart. What do you mean the contract is off? He barked at his board members during an emergency meeting. His manager, Kunal, looked pale. There was a security breach. Sensitive documents were leaked to the competition. The investors are furious. Jide felt his heart hammering. How the hell did this happen? Tommy suddenly burst into the meeting room, her eyes blazing. I'll tell you how, she shouted. Everyone turned to her in shock. Tommy stormed forward, slamming a folder of printed emails onto the table. Your precious Megan did this. She's been playing you all along. Jide grabbed the documents, his hands shaking as he read them. His face turned white. Every message, every document, every transaction traced back to Megan. He felt sick. Well, it couldn't be. Megan. Megan was Serafina. Jide stormed into Serafina's penthouse, his fury uncontrollable. She was waiting for him, dressed elegantly, sipping on a glass of wine. So, she said calmly, placing her drink down. You finally figured it out. Jide's fists clenched. You played me. Serafina stood, walking towards him fearlessly. No, Jide. I beat you. Jide's breathing was ragged. You ruined me. Serafina tilted her head. Oh, you mean like how you ruined me? Like how you stole my father's company? Like how you humiliated me in front of an entire ballroom? Jide's jaw tightened. He had never felt powerless before until now. Serafina smirked. How does it feel, Jide? To be on the losing side for once. Jide lunged at her, gripping her arm tightly, his face inches from hers. I will destroy you, Serafina. She laughed softly, completely unafraid. No, Jide. You already destroyed yourself. Just then, security burst in, pulling Jide away from her. Sir, one of the men said, you need to leave. Jide struggled, but the guards dragged him out, shoving him into the cold night air. For the first time in his life, Jide had nothing. And as he looked back at the woman he once belittled, standing tall, strong, and victorious, he realized he has created his own worst enemy. And she had no intention of stopping now. The next morning, the headline news exploded. Coal industries collapses. Investors pull out after fraud allegations. Jidena Cole exposed. Former wife reclaims her family's legacy. Jide sat in his empty penthouse, staring at the TV in disbelief. His company, his reputation, everything. Meanwhile, Serafina sat in her new office, overlooking the city. Her father's company was hers again. Tobe stood beside her. You did it. Serafina smiled, full of power. No, she said. I just got started.